Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. So we have a very interesting panel discussion for you guys right after lunch. We're going to discuss cybersecurity perspectives. And I'm going to introduce Dr. Winston McClean, the moderator for your panel, to get you guys started.
Good afternoon. Yes, there we go. My name is Winston McClean, and I'm a representative of the Information System Security Association of Barbados chapter. And we are talking this afternoon about the cyber landscape in Barbados. One of the things that I would like to begin with is to bring our attention to 7 points that were identified as the global threat trends expected over the next 3 years. And one, that there would be significant amount of data breaches through IoT, information, the Internet of Things, and an increased risk of cyber extortions and data breaches, that there are going to be an increase in those areas. 3, increased pessimism by IT practitioners who find that their ability to protect organizations from cybercrime will be increasingly difficult. Greater negative impact will be involved in terms of high volume data and a lack of empowerment by boards of directors within organizations. And finally, that businesses will have to spend more to achieve regulatory compliance, as well as to respond to lawsuits and tort litigation. So within such a context and a landscape that is projected over the next 3 years on a global level, and in many respects, we within small jurisdictions like Barbados can expect that many of these things will have an impact on us. We want to talk about where we are and also what we can do in this context. What I'm going to do is to ask the panelists to give a brief description of, well, say what are their names, what organization they represent, and the area of expertise. And I'll start from the far right.
Right, hi, and a very good afternoon, everyone. Right, I'm Brian Linton. Right, come from a company, well, actually we wear several hats. So I work at a company called Garnet Technologies. I like to think that I'm also still a member of the Barbados ICT Professional Association, Stephen, even though I've not been to meetings recently, but I will pay my dues shortly. Yeah, great. Indeed, right? Yeah, and generally ICT practitioner, you know, I'm interested in things like ICT, all ICT. As I often tell people, I complain often that I'm tired if they ask me on the morning, hey, how are you doing? Truth be told, sometimes 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, I'll jump out of bed and go online to take a look at whatever the latest trend is. AI, artificial intelligence to use to monitor farm animals to make them more productive. You know, just last week, I think I was reading about that. I thought it was pretty interesting. I probably stayed up from 3 to almost 6 a.m. reading that. And hey, apparently that's the next growth area, so maybe we in Barbados could look to leverage that. Yeah, so that's generally me. What I would say, I like to tell people that I don't want to be pigeonholed. You know, so don't call me a software programmer, even though I program. Don't necessarily call me a trainer, even though I train. Generally, if there's an area in ICT, I try to embrace it. I try to take a look at it. I like to believe I'm an expert in some areas. I'm not going to do every single thing. Crawl around in several rooms is not exactly my love, but every now and then I have to do it. Programming to the break of dawn, yeah, well, I'm definitely there. Yeah, so that's a very brief synopsis about me. Thanks.
Thanks.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Pedro Farrell. I'm the Information Systems Manager at Barbados Water Authority. At the BWA, I am responsible essentially for managing all the IT infrastructure and the people who work under me to guide and train them. I don't think I would consider myself an expert in any one particular field, but I do love troubleshooting. I love working with hardware. Don't necessarily like to work with people all the time, but I love working with hardware. Yeah, so troubleshooting, that kind of stuff, I love to do. Right.
Good afternoon. My name is Patricia RoweSeale. I am from CIBC FirstCaribbean. I have responsibility for enterprise security. That includes information security. I'm also responsible for fraud and supplier risk management. Unlike the two gentlemen to my right, I do consider myself a subject matter expert as it relates to governance and risk management, particularly information security.
Good afternoon. My name is Ovvyng Harewood. I am Chief E-Government Development Officer. I am representing basically the government of Barbados. I am by no means a security specialist or security expert. My role as Chief E-Government Development Officer is to look at what is happening within the systems in government as it relates to moving systems towards citizen-centric systems.
Right, thank you very much. So we are a little more acquainted with everyone. And I'm going to put in the first question to Mr. Linton. Given the context that I've just outlined, one of my experiences, part of my experience thus far is that IT professionals believe that they're generally doing a good job. We would like to think so. I mean, we want them to have a good esteem, so that's okay. But within the context that have been outlined and the challenge that is going to face us over the next 3 years, and businesses at present are struggling with best practices, putting those in place. And hackers have been targeting smartphones and tablets of recent times. And also, there's been an increased spread of malware, especially as you look at the introduction of IoT solutions. How do we address this problem, especially in the small island states like Barbados?
Yeah, and it definitely remains a challenge. There's a file that has to be queued up on Marshall. The file is queued. Okay, yeah, no problem. I can tell one of my stories, as people like to say. I'm a member of a WhatsApp group, has maybe like 500 members. What we call the guys group. Mostly the people in the group would be guys, yeah, gentlemen, yeah, right. So it's just a chat. We talk a lot. Some risky things, yada yada. Yeah, yeah. The other day, someone sent a file and basically had a link saying click here image file, right? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Right. So if you can put up the first file, right? This comes up. We close our eyes quickly. Right, and they say, hey, click here to download this information. In the chat, in any one day, you get anywhere from 200 to sometimes 500 messages. So I usually catch at the end of the day. Right, so apparently someone posts this image, and then when you click on it, can you go on to the second image? Right, this comes out, right? It loads out there, right? Yeah, but apparently people were quite peeved, and they're there saying, hey, you posted this and it's not real. Why you waste our time? That kind of thing. As the IT person in the group, I reminded them that, look, you get an image inside a WhatsApp group, an email, someone sends you a file. You don't just run and click and open it. It's not the usual kind of file. Because the person who sent that, normally they hardly speak in the group. But they posted that. So the first thing you should be thinking is, okay, this is unusual behavior. Let me make a call. Let me ask a question before you go and click on this. And yeah, even though this might look like it's pushing it to the limit, I mean, really, this kind of thing happens every day. You have people in an organization, they basically run a script, they run a file, it has some kind of unintended consequence, and then quite often they don't mention it to their ICT personnel in the organization. And it's even more of a challenge because we are educating people, and we are thinking about, hey, I bring my staff in the organization, I try to sensitize them about these issues, but then they get something like that, and they say, hey, let me click on it. Where did the 3 months of training just took you through? There's one of the guys in chat, he's a member of multinational, we call him the traveling guy. Almost every week he's going down to either Latin America or the US to try to get some additional training. And he was one of the people complaining about how he clicked on this image and nothing happened. You know, where you click on this image, I'm pretty sure you got the training that said, look out for this kind of thing. So, that's one of the challenges. IT and you know, the internet is in all of our phones, from our smartphones to our computers to our tablets, right? Along with that needs to come a certain level of education, because we then take those devices and we take them into the organization where they can threaten our actual workplaces. Yeah, so to me, one of the biggest challenges would be how to get your end users to actually recognize that this is actually a threat and something they need to look at. And one other very quick story, there's another guy who often comes to me to change his password on his cell phone. Well, he uses a lock code, one of the swipe codes, right? So then one day he came and he said, hey, you know, my IT officer at work, I wish I could fire him and get you, because he always makes me change my password at work. So I'm like, okay, well, you change your password on your phone almost every 2 months, you know, why is it a problem at work? And he said, oh, you know, my wife, you know, she always wants to go on my phone and look and see who I'm talking to. So that's why I have to go and change the unlock code, right? And yeah, I got a little friend, and this is let me not say anything about the guy, right? But you see, in that case, he has a rationale. He has a reason why he wants to change his password. He recognizes why this is an issue for him, because it's not real to him in his particular context. But in the workplace, he's not seeing why it's important to change his password frequently. So we need to take users to that point where they understand this is a threat, but then also how do we move to address it, and how it impacts them.
Thank you very much. Linton? And yes. Mr. Harewood, I'm going to come this end now. Given your area, you are also in the field of management and information systems. And one of the things that is very often, well, I shouldn't say very often, one of the emerging trends or techniques that hackers are using is to target what we call the interstitial area, where the businesses having internet solutions and also the local enterprise systems, and they're kind of targeting areas within that intersection, or where we have the cloud computing, and then persons are utilizing smart devices and so on. How do you see that issue within the Barbadian landscape in terms of both attacks to government sites, management systems within organizations, and what can be done? What advice do you have to the audience?
You are very correct. However, we have quite a few challenges as it relates to persons hacking government sites, etc. Quite recently, we have been blessed by some assistance from the European Union, where they have assisted us with the development not only of a cybersecurity strategy, but also of material for awareness, because we believe that it is very important for you to ensure that the users are aware of threats and what to do and what not to do. As it relates to the internet, we are a bit behind the eight ball in government, in that for a very long time, a lot of our processes, a lot of the things that we would have wanted to achieve would have costed more money than we could have afforded. We are very fortunate in that quite recently we have a change of thought, and persons are now, when I say persons, I'm referring to my bosses, are now recognizing that there is a cost to data. There is a cost to the information that is being held, and hence we need to protect it. So because of that, we are doing quite a bit. The last thing that we are doing now is a security audit of the systems within government to see where where the biggest vulnerabilities are. Let me say the biggest vulnerabilities. because there are vulnerabilities, and we all recognize that. But we hope that coming out of this audit, that we will be able to start closing a lot of the possible holes that there are and moving on.
Okay, thank you. Patricia RoweSeale, as an expert in the area of audit and enterprise security and governance, I have a long question for you. And I'm going to ask you to cover, because there's a number of things in terms of, and especially as a person in the area of banking. So we have a number of issues relative to the changing attack space or surface of where the boundaries between the business boundaries, where the endpoints in the business, what we call the perimeters, and the areas outside of business are being blurred. So if you all have, for example, online banking and people using smartphones, and then where are the boundaries? So we have a changing attack space that is available. Also, we also have a culture of convenience. You all are helping with that because people are able to access money and their resources in a much simpler way and easier. Most of you have signs that say it's easier instead of being in a long line and so forth. And then there is the question of the competition in business. The competition is making, for example, some businesses being in a hurry to get to the market, to the customers, and sometimes the code isn't as secure as it should be, or updates are poor, and sometimes we have downtime, systems crashing. And then there's the element of the human error. Human error. It's a long question. Where people leave their systems unlocked, people sometimes aren't using safe passwords and so on. So I know these are things as an auditor you have to oftentimes be looking at and addressing. So we want to hear a little bit of your advice on such a broad area.
I hope I can remember the question. It's quite long. But I would just start by saying in today's world, especially within the industry which I work, as you rightly said, the perimeters are blurred. And one thing you must remember is that the most valuable, well, not the most valuable, one of the most valuable, because I still think people are the most valuable asset, but your data is one of your most valuable assets. So at any point in time, you have to know exactly where your data is residing, understand your data flows. Once you have an understanding of where your data is at and how your data is from the full data life cycle, then you can build a risk profile, because every single thing does not require the same level of protection. So you have to build a risk profile, understand what are the threats that you are exposed to, understand what are the motivations of the persons who might want to infiltrate your organizations. So when you have that understanding, you can build, you develop a risk profile. Once you have your risk profile, then you can determine how you will protect that data. And then you build your protections from there. And it's not just a one size fits all. You have to have sort of like defense in depth. You know, you start at the outer perimeter and you do A, B, and C, you come closer and you do X, Y, and Z. But it is not a haphazard. It is not like, oh, maybe I should do this. It must be planned and it must be risk-based. Because as you rightly said, and Mr. Harewood would have mentioned, protection costs money. So you can't afford to protect something that doesn't need protecting. And so you must understand your data. So that is one way in which you do that. And I forgot some of your questions already.
The other one is the error of humans.
Okay. Before we get to that one, you talk about, when you said I remember, talk about code, right?
Yes, in secure code updates.
Secure code. And because you have a whole risk approach to what you do, obviously developing code now is critical. So you have to have a program in place that allows your developers to produce code within good timelines, because you mentioned competition. You don't want to take 2 years to develop something when your competition is doing in 6 months. So you have to have processes in place that allow your developers to develop code, but at the same time, it's like doing it right the first time. So you have tools and techniques that actually test your code as it's being developed. So there are no vulnerabilities that one can develop, whether you're using SQL, whether you're using Java, and a list of programming languages go on. But there are tools available that allows you to test as you are developing before you go into production the quality of your code. So you should be doing those tests. And that is part of your defense in-depth approach. Human error. Unfortunately for us, humans are the weakest link in the chain. There would always be human error. And therefore, we can't allow humans to drive security in terms of what they do. So going back to Garrett's conversation about changing a password, as part of your whole strategy, having done your risk assessment, have your risk profile, you would know, okay, anybody connecting to my core systems must change their password every 10 days, 20 days, whatever your parameter is. And then your system should automatically prevent someone from logging on if he or she has not changed their password. So we have to force humans to behave in certain ways. You talk about the Internet of Things. So as part of your whole risk management strategy, you probably can say something like, we would not allow certain systems to connect to our networks unless we have pre-approved them and we know what is connecting to a network. So for example, you may have a laptop, and we are over here at the Sagicor building. You work at, let's assume you're working at a university. While your laptop might be able to plug into one of the ports here, you can't go over to the law faculty and plug in because you don't belong to law. And so that's how you can do your protection of your environment. So it must be a holistic, systematic approach. It cannot be haphazard. If we do it haphazard, we're going to spend more money and not get the benefits of the money we're spending.
Beautiful. You see why I asked her such a long question? And I know she would do just that, knocked it out of the park. Pedro, Farrell, you are in MIS, Waterworks. It's a resource, and we are a water-scarce country. Water is, what is the slogan? Yeah, well, water is life. And you have been rolling out devices that we can say fall into the category of IoT devices as well. You have these smart devices that telling us, these meters, telling us what our water usage and so on. Tell us a little bit of some of the risks. You can expand beyond that too, and any other area that you care to, but tell us about some of the risks relative to the IoT devices, and especially when it's related to such a critical resource like water. And in the context of, it hasn't happened here, but it's happened in other places where you have ransomware, and people have been utilizing these kind of tools to extort, especially institutions and organizations that have money or have important resources. So what keeps you up at night relative to that? Or what should be, or what do you expect will in the future be keeping you up at night, Linton?
Well, for one thing, the water meters don't keep me up at night. There'll be other things like ensuring that data is backed up and stuff. But back to the IoT devices. Right now, as you mentioned, we are implementing smart meters. Those meters are designed to assist the BWA in more accurately measuring water and also billing customers. In terms of like hacking and stuff like that, I am right now not sure if those devices can actually be hacked or anything, or if they are hacked, what would happen, because all you will get from it basically is a meter reading and maybe an error code telling you that, I don't know, your water, that you have a leak or a potential leak, right? So So that's why those meters don't keep me up at night right now. We are implementing SCADA, that's supervisory control and data acquisition, at our various pumping stations. That would allow us to monitor what's happening at the stations, monitor the pumps, and we are not there yet, but we would be able to control, like turn on and off pumps when needed. We can program the system to automatically do those things based on levels in the reservoirs, etc. Right? We aren't at that stage yet, but that would be a bigger concern for us.
But yes,
because,
just to cross you a minute, I'm thinking of meters in a broader sense, not only the meter at the consumer end, but you have meters that you
at the production
end, at the supply end, you have meters that you are actually tracking your water levels and those things. So.
Yeah, right. So for the most part, they would monitor the levels or the amount of water we pump out. So if someone were to hack a meter like that, I suppose they can change the data that we are then collecting, and we might possibly maybe turn off a pump where we shouldn't have or something like that there, so because they changed the data. So at the production side, we will be more concerned, and that's where we also have like SCADA. We're looking at technologies that protect SCADA equipment, right, to mitigate those kinds of threats.
Okay, thank you. One of the things that sometimes we take for granted in terms of resources in these smaller jurisdictions, how they can be exploited to put countries under stress and duress in terms of one of the things that people have been utilizing more and targeting in terms of ransomware is to extort businesses and organizations and have you to pay up money as a result of they being able to put in critical resources under stress or strain and, at risk. And if you don't pay, the damage that they will cause. So I was just wondering if it is one of the things that you've been thinking about as an organization. Thank you very much for that round of questions. One of the things that I would also, before we go to the audience, we want to give the audience a chance to ask some questions. We have challenges sometimes in the area of insider risk or threat, where persons work inside organizations, have access to passwords, codes, they know the technology, and sometimes the hacking or the challenge doesn't come from outside, but it comes from within. And that is an area that we oftentimes overlook. And so I want to give yes. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Well, that is just another threat, insider threat, right? So again, I'm going to be saying this over and over, your risk management. Once you have done that, you recognize that insiders, and if you look at some of the breach reports, a couple of companies do them every year, PwC, EY, and the list goes on, a very large percentage of breaches and things that happen actually come from inside. So then you have to have protection. Your data is your crown jewels. So you have to know at any point in time who have access to your data. So you must protect your privileged IDs. Persons should only be given access to the system sufficient to allow them to do their job and nothing more. And that must be guarded, and you not only do it once, you put it in and you have regular attestations to that. Your privileged IDs must be secure in a vault. So you have like a password vault that keeps stuff in there, and you can only get it if you have a legitimate reason to do it, and you have to take it out. Somebody has to prove it. It comes out. The person, the technical person uses it, and then they put it back in the vault. The vault automatically changes the passwords every 24 hours, every 48 hours, depending on the risk. So you must understand your risk, and then you have to put your mitigants in place to deal with the risk. And we must recognize that insiders sometimes either purposely, it could be a malicious action, or it could be an error. And so you have to have those protections in place. Likewise, if you know that persons have a level of access to allow them to, like, say, delete a database, change records, that access must be logged. and those logs must be reviewed. Now, when I say review a log, I'm not asking anybody to look at streams and streams of information. You have to build some intelligence into that so that you will be alerted if a particular condition is met. And that alert goes immediately to a person who works 24 hours. Well, you have a shift, right? And that person would act upon that. So there are ways to protect that. And that is why you have to give it careful thought and plan it out.
Linton, the area of the end user, we have a lot of persons, even persons who work within business are also end users. We have a lot of end users, people who, as we mentioned earlier, they have to access their bank accounts, they have to, their social media, and there are varying risks and increasing risks to the end user. I want you to speak to that issue and tell us what are some of the things, other things that end users need to be, not only be aware of. You spoke to awareness element earlier, but what are some of the specific things that people must be doing to safeguard themselves?
Story again. Right, yeah, in my case, well, like many of us, I have a credit card, yeah? Right, so I had a situation where transactions were being run against the credit card for 50 cents, $1, that kind of thing. Obviously, the average person does not swipe a transaction for 50 cents. Yes, I saw it in my online account, and obviously I'm in this field, but I saw, I was like, hey, what's that 50 cent transaction? I have to check that out, but hey, it's 50 cents. Yeah, I wondered that someone had gotten my credit card details, and they then used it to try to launch a larger attack against my card. Thankfully, I do have a card from, yes, I'll say CIBC, and they have some great controls there. So basically, I was able to lock it down using the mobile app, so they weren't able to succeed. Yeah, but for a user, you need to be able to identify trends like that. I mean, if I'm in the field and I see something risky and I say, hey, I'll deal with it later. What about the average end user who this is not what they do every day? They don't recognize the risks, right? So, yes, I talk about sensitization, knowing about these things. That's really critical. People need to understand why this is a threat, why it can impact them, and how it can impact them. There's a story, this was overseas, so not here, where someone used a vacuum cleaner, basically hacked into LG vacuum cleaner, and it has a webcam, so they were able to drive around the person's house and basically map the entry and exit point so that they could then break into the house. They were able to succeed, but the point is, hey, those are kind of real risks that are out there. And hey, I could go out to a discount store here and buy a similar device, and I went home and like, great, I don't have to vacuum anymore. Just put down this automatic Roomba and let it drive around the room. But I'm not thinking, hey, there's a potential security risk there. So then it becomes for people like us, people in the community, to sensitize people, to make it real, to say, okay, yes, you're about to buy a vacuum cleaner, but let's think about the potential risks here. Great benefits, but then how do you also move to mitigate these risks as well? And sometimes as simple as, why does your vacuum cleaner need to be on the internet? Let's disable that feature, for example. You've addressed the risk, have a great Roomba that keeps the house clean, you have more time to sleep, in my case, yeah? Thanks.
Thank you very much. I'm going to put this to both Mr. Harewood and Farrell as well, as MIS persons. Mr. Howard, you were involved in the development of the government system. Was it Smart Stream? Am I correct?
Yes, you're correct.
Right. So governance is one of the things that you've dedicated a lot of your hours of time to. Distributed denial of service attacks. Also, as an MIS person, there are some persons who may not be within the business environment or government as you are, but they're setting up their own little websites and so on as well. And maybe trying to also, as entrepreneurs, offer some kind of service. In some cases, even though they may be outsourcing the network and so on, buying cloud service. The issue of denial of their services and what are some of the things that they need to know? What are some of the things that we can do to address that problem? Prevent ourselves from being victims of that risk.
due diligence. Due diligence is very important when you are encroaching on doing business with any organization. I believe that background checks are very important. A lot of the time you have to look at what other persons, other customers that they have would have said about them. Because on about 2 occasions, we encountered the situations where we did business with an organization, and even though we would have done quite a bit of due diligence, we found ourselves out to sea. Looking back at it, probably our due diligence was not as good as it should have been, but I think at the time we used all the information that was available to us.
Okay. Quickly, Pedro, and then we want to give you, the audience, a chance to ask these experts some questions. So please line up.
Okay. Getting into your own business, as Ovvyng mentioned, due diligence, ensure that you have, at least to speak to someone, some kind of consultant or something who can assist you, who can guide you in doing the right things. Research best practices, for example. Ensure you have maybe firewalls and stuff in place. You don't have to buy the expensive ones. You can get fairly inexpensive ones as well. But you must do your due diligence. You must ensure that you protect yourself, basically. Yeah.
Good afternoon, Stephen Williams, Barbados IT Professional Association. Yes, sorry, not feeling too well. Question, I guess for the whole panel. Listening to what you guys were talking about, I'm not sure if y'all do any collaboration amongst each other because y'all seem to be at a very high level. So is there time you have water, we have banking, we have government, not leaving you out there, but you know, what you guys represent is something called national critical infrastructure. Because at any point in time the government goes down, we know it's a riot. We know if the banking goes down, patients can't get the money, it's a riot. And if I can't drink my water, there's a riot. So isn't this time, and y'all set the tone for national critical infrastructure? And it doesn't necessarily have, doesn't necessarily have to be connected IT, but connected people. I go back to people. Because what I'm seeing here is a good platform to launch I don't want to say government-led, but a high-level-led team that speak to energy, water, banking, government, food security, because we are moving into SCADA systems and moving into real-time banking systems, and we're moving into probably what we know 24-hour government with what we're looking at going forward. So where we are, I want to know your views on if the time is right. Would you consider that level of collaboration if the opportunity was presented to you? Excuse me. And where does the GDPR fit in with governance as you see it right now within your organizations? Because you're collecting a lot of personal information on people, and you're collecting coordinated data. You're talking about those individual devices, right? But those individual devices upstream data that is now used by data analysis to run other metrics. I ain't gonna say nothing about banks. I got my own issues with the banking community and government in itself. We have to rely on the fact that you are secure. You give me no proof that you are secure. I have to rely on you, and I don't. Ovvyng, you're a great man. However, okay, the banking systems are a lot more transparent because I know they speak to a higher authority, and their best practices are almost international. So those are my 2 questions.
Okay. In terms of the critical infrastructure, yes. I think I really can't speak from a government perspective because I have no authority, I have no knowledge. But I think we are at a stage, actually, we're behind where we should be in terms of my personal belief, in terms of having that sort of critical infrastructure organization that set clear guidelines and principles in terms of how they should operate. So we have to get there. A couple of years ago, I've been to a meeting with some government agencies, and that was part of the discussion led by the Commonwealth Secretariat. They were doing some work around that. I cannot speak any further than that because I'm not in government, but it is necessary. The other thing that I would add to that as well is cyber criminals share information. You go onto the deep web or the dark web, and they're sharing it, they're collaborating. The only way that we will be able to get near to them in terms of their activities is if we have that level of collaboration. Right now in Barbados, we don't have to report breaches. So breaches can go undetected. Now, people might say it as a competitive advantage that you don't know that I might be hacked or whatever, but the benefit in having mandatory reporting of breaches is that company A report it, it is automatically disseminated to company B, C, D, E, whatever, and you can then decrease the probability of other persons being impacted by that. So we have to get to that stage, but I think in most jurisdictions where you saw it, it was led by government or some government agency. As you speak to GDPR, technically, unless you are doing direct business with the persons in Great Britain, European Union, you don't have a requirement. However, it would be a commercial advantage if you were compliant. And to add to that, if you are in the Caribbean and you're doing business regionally, Jamaica has their version, okay? Bahamas has a similar version. Barbados has a draft bill at the moment that is out for comments. So, and they all sort of pattern and look similar to the GDPR. So it's just a matter of time.
Okay, we're going to go to the question over here, and some other person in the panel will take it, and they'll be coming to.
Good afternoon. My name is Albert Daniels with ICANN, the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. I do come from the dark side. In a previous life, I was a certified information systems and security auditor. I still keep my certification, so I'm up to date and current. I just wanted to add a piece of information with regard to a question posed by the moderator on the DDoS attacks, the distributed denial of service attacks. ICANN's role globally is to coordinate and maintain the Internet's unique system of identifiers, the names and the numbers, all of the IP addresses globally, and all of the names. And there is this system called the DNS, the Domain Name Service, which translates domain names, google.com, facebook.com, into numbers. Now, when it comes to attacks, it has been found that because the system was originally designed to be open, that this translation process was a place where many significant attacks could take place. There's something called DNSSEC, Domain Name System Security Extensions, which has been developed to prevent a hacker from jumping in after you type the web address for your bank and you get an IP address for the server and giving his own IP address. So one of the things that can be done by financial companies, by financial entities, by governments, and by any private organization is to deploy DNSSEC. So if you have not already started having discussions on this, I would highly recommend that you take a look at DNSSEC and the extent to which you can make end user information, particularly for financial institutions, more secure. And if you have been discussing DNSSEC, I would be interested to hear a little bit about what you've been saying. Thanks.
Okay, let us take the next question.
Hello? Right. This question comes from the Facebook page. In your respective organizations, how do you define or what defines legitimate use of client data? And who decides who can access that data if there are outside of the specific collecting agency?
in the systems within government, if you have, if you're working with any specific department, that department determines the use of the data. Outside of that, we don't have rules really as to how that data can be used outside of the purpose for which you determined that it should be used. Currently, most departmental heads, though, tend to be very protective of the data. So we have not had known cases where data would have been passed from one department to another, but we don't have rules really in place at this time to ensure that the information is not used for other purposes.
I would just add to that being in a highly regulated industry, the regulations really determine how we can collect, what data we can collect, what data we can collect, and how we use that data. Fundamental to it is that you can only use the data in the way, you can only use the data for the purpose in which it was collected. So I cannot collect your personal data to open up, say, a bank account, and then sell that data onto somebody else. That can't be done. So the data can only be used for the purpose in which it was collected. And when all of these data protection legislations that are in draft finally roll out in the Caribbean, that will be heavily enforced.
Yes, one of the problems is that in Barbados we do not have a Data Protection Act, but there's one in draft, and until we get that legislation, there will be a little bit of challenge in that area.
Good afternoon. I'm Dion Olton from the Caribbean Cybersecurity Center. And I have a question and a few comments. I'll probably go with the comments first. The lady from FirstCaribbean would have mentioned the importance to do a risk assessment, risk management, know your risk, know your attack surfaces, how the bad guys are coming after you. I think that's foundational. You need to have some foundational controls. But before you get the controls, you need to understand what the attack surfaces are, who's coming after you, so that you can build a wall, the proverbial wall, to protect yourself from those that are trying to get in. And awareness is in my mind, one of the best investments that any organization can make. So making your staff aware of the risk, the threats, phishing schemes, because hackers of today, and I'll give you a little overview quick, hackers today are not really trying to get through your firewall anymore. It's too much work. Hackers are trying to use low-tech ways to get into high-tech organizations, right? So, for example, if I was trying to break into FirstCaribbean, I'm not going to try to go through all the firewalling and all that stuff. I would use social engineering or email phishing scheme to get access straight in, hop through the perimeter controls, all your controls, and gain access to the environment. That's how it's being done. Likewise, you'll see there isn't a big thing with ransomware going on today because all the law enforcement is saying, don't pay the ransom, right? So law enforcement is telling the users and the user community, don't pay the ransom. So the guys who are supposed to benefit from the ransom being paid aren't getting the money. So they're finding different ways now to gain money through stuff like Bitcoin farming, planting malware on your computers and using up your CPU and stuff like that, right? That's just my little introduction. My question to the panel would be, based on the different environments that you have to defend and protect, what are some of the now things that you all are seeing as it relates to threats coming to your environment? That was the question.
Okay. Some of the threats that we see stem from people using, for example, USB drives. A simple thing. They use USB drives at home, they bring them into the workplace. So we have to make sure not necessarily perimeter now, but the actual endpoint devices, the endpoint systems on your network are actually protected as well. So that's one of the major things that we're seeing right now, the use of USBs, because people love to say they have to take home work because it's too much at work, blah, 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 so they take home the devices and stuff. But then their systems at home may not be as protected, so then they can possibly bring back malware and stuff into the organization. Okay? So that's one threat that we actively seek to mitigate against.
I would just add to Mr. Water Authority that, and just, you said Mr. Alton, right? Just Colton or Alton? Alton, okay. As Mr. Alton said, you need to understand what your threats are. And in this day and age, no offense intended, one should not be able to take a USB stick from home and bring it back to the office. Those endpoints are notorious for allowing things to come through the back door, and it should be shut down. There's no legitimate reason for that to happen. The cost of having to remediate or to correct yourself after you've had an issue is not worth the benefit of the one or two persons. You remember there was a nuclear plant in Iran that was brought down, right? That was destroyed, and it was destroyed by somebody taking up a USB stick that was particularly planted by some state. I don't know which state it was, and they put it into a computer system, and it was this, I don't know where it was, but there was a stick, right?
It was a stick, yeah.
So as Mr. Alton correctly said, the everyday hacker, I'm not talking about state-sponsored hacks, because if they're state-sponsored, they're going after a particular asset, and they have the money and the will to do whatever they want to do, right? But the everyday person who might be hacking and stuff, they're looking for the easy way. And so then you as an organization have to understand the person's motivation and how they're going to try to get in. So email, right, people can send emails, but then you have to have at your email gateway the level of stripping. So you're looking for a barrage of stuff. So unless something was 0 day, it shouldn't be able to pass through your gateway. So you have to think of all the different ways persons can get into your organization, and you have to shut them down. If you can't prevent them from getting in, because you may not be able to prevent everything, you must be able to quickly detect that they're there. And once you have detected that they're there, you must be quickly able to contain them and get them out of your environment. So one hand you can protect by putting some mitigants in place. Just in case your protection doesn't work, you have to be able to detect. And once you've been able to detect, then you must be able to contain and correct. So it's multifaceted. It's not one thing works, but there is a soup bowl, sort of a hodgepodge of a couple of things that one must use. But you must be cognizant and understand your environment. If you don't understand your environment, there's no way that you're going to be able to protect it.
One of the issues of sticks and so on is that we often think of hacking as just someone behind a computer coming through the internet and accessing systems, but a majority of the exploits are by people who learn how to take advantage of the human weakness. So like dropping the stick in the instance for someone to pick up and put into their system. So social engineering is a big part of it. And for all of us, we should pay a lot of attention to social engineering and how people may exploit our weaknesses. Next question.
Good afternoon. I'm Charles Cyrus with the Ministry of Innovation, Science, and Smart Technologies. This question is not necessarily for the panelists, but it just may be a point of clarification. Mr. Moderator, your introduction to set the context, you had mentioned that businesses would respond to lawsuits and litigation, and you think that there would be an increase in that. So I was wondering, are you suggesting that clients and customers will be holding businesses liable to the breaches of data? Is that where you were going with that question? But
One of the findings, like the Poniman research, for example, only this year, have been projecting that there's going to be an increase of lawsuits, but not only from individuals because of things like the data protection laws that are being implemented. So you get lawsuits in terms of people's use, how businesses utilize people's data, like the question that came from on the online question, and not the appropriate use of the data. And what you have seen from the GDPR is that some international businesses are being held to and being given exorbitant fines. But it wasn't only the EU, for example, as a government agency that has done that. One of the first lawsuits that was placed to Facebook as soon as the GDPR came in was by an individual. So there's a projection that you will get a lot more lawsuits because people have now a legal framework for which they can go after businesses who they think have been misusing their data, or even businesses who have been hacked and did not notify persons. So some people have suffered because a business was hacked, did not notify them, their data was sold on the dark web, and then they had a problem of identity theft and had to go through years of trying to recover their identity, where people might take out loans or different things in their name. And there has been little recourse. But the introduction of some of these laws are going to give people recourse. And so businesses will find that they have to be a little bit more cognizant as to how compliant they are, because not only the regulators they will have to be afraid of, but the ordinary customer and the citizen who will be empowered by the law. Any other questions?
My final question is, what do you think about GDPR? Isn't it really just a stimulus to act and do what is right? Because as far as and maybe the lady from FirstCaribbean might agree, as far as I know, all the things that GDPR is recommending is just best practice that we should have been doing 10 years ago. So May 25th came this year, and we were supposed to toe the line, and because if you're doing business with European nationals or UK nationals, we have to do these things, or else they're going to hit us with some steep fines, right? So my question is, what efforts have Water Authority, I know FirstCaribbean's answer already, and government have done to toe the line in anticipation of the fines that may be coming if you're not ready?
Okay, for the Barbados Water Authority, we have recently set up a legal and compliance unit, and they're actually in the process of drafting a similar GDPR policy, basically, that would dictate then how we use data. Well, if we have data from the Europeans and stuff, right? So we are actually actively looking at GDPR, and we want to make sure that we are indeed compliant.
As it relates to government, I am sure that you would have seen the draft data protection bill that would have been sent out for comments. I am sure that there will be a lot of discussion on that, and we will want quite a bit of input on it. But I think that I am kind of happy for GDPR because it has forced us into a position where we have to act. I am of the belief, I heard my colleague indicate that this is probably not the case, but I am of the belief that if the information that we are holding of EU citizens is used for reasons other than what they were destined for, then we pay a hefty fine. And I think because of that, we have had numerous meetings on it. We are now looking at how we can move towards covering quite a few holes. I know that we are looking at a system currently for immigration, and my bosses have told me straight off, from bottom line, make sure that it is GDPR compliant before we move. And I'm really glad to hear these things, you know, because it's now forcing us to think of security in a different light.
Thank you very much. I think we are out of time. So I would like to thank, okay, one online question, last online question, yes.
Right, hello. Right. This is from Alison James. And the question is to the panel. What do you think is the importance of annual compliance reports for companies? Should they be made mandatory?
Who's going to take this? One person. Somebody from the regulatory area? That would be Mrs. RoweSeale.
Annual compliance report is quite a wide area. Compliance with what, you know? But assuming that we are thinking it from a information security perspective, again, I would say I tend not to subscribe to anything that is cyclic on a cycle, because you have to go back to your risk. If I have something that is high risk, maybe I have to do a compliance report every 6 months, depending on what it is. If I have something that is medium risk, maybe it can live with 18 months. If I have something that is low risk, maybe it can be 5 years, I don't know. But you have to determine that. So I'm not one to say, yes, it should be every year, because there's some things that the risk profile is low or very low, and it really the value of doing it annually would not be there. I think you have to go back on a risk basis and determine the frequency of the compliance reporting that is necessary.
Thank you very much. Thank you, panel. Thank you, audience. Mr. Linton, Mr. Pedro Farrell, Mrs. Patricia RoweSeale, Mr. Harewood, sorry, Mr. Harewood, and Winston McClean. Thank you for your time. Have a good afternoon.